everyone. Welcome to another edition of Just Curious podcast. Today we have David Moore with us. He is president and founder of PA Equality Project, which we're going to talk about in a moment. David, can you introduce yourself briefly and talk to us about PA?
Of course. Thank you, Charles, for having me. Pennsylvania Equality Project was founded in 2011. At the time, we were called Marriage Equality for Pennsylvania. And we were founded under that name because at the time, New York was just getting marriage rights for same-sex couples. And then in 2014, when Pennsylvania won marriage rights through a case that went through Harrisburg, through the federal system, it no longer made any sense to call us Marriage Equality for Pennsylvania because the battle was done. So we changed our name to Pennsylvania Equality Project to show that we're fighting for rights beyond just those for marriage.
What is the state of marriage rights in the States? Is it legal in every state to marry same-sex?
In 2015, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that marriage for same-sex couples is legal in all 50 states and U.S. territories.
Okay.
And on tribal lands. The court left it very plain that the 14th Amendment protects that right. And that was the case called Obergefell v. Hodges.
What about the world? In what countries of the world is it still not legal to have a same-sex marriage?
Well, there are certainly a number of countries in Asia, for example. We are certain that China does not allow marriage for same-sex couples. Saudi Arabia, Iran, Iraq, none of those countries permit marriage for same-sex couples.
I spoke with another gentleman. He is part of an organization that flies people from these countries to the US so that they can marry here and have more rights, because it's not only about the marriage, it's also about the conditions they live in, when their family literally wants to kill them because they are gay. How can we, this is just one solution, right? How can we help these countries or people that are part of LGBTQ community out there? How can we help them improve their lives?
So I would suggest a number of things. First of all, there are organizations like Rainbow Railroad that are assisting people from countries like Afghanistan and Syria and others that are looking for some measure of escape, whether that's to the United States, to Canada, to the European Union. And what they're looking for are people in those countries to stand up for them as people who would support them through their immigration efforts. Yeah. Our organization is not involved in that kind of international diplomacy, though I personally have helped some people escape from, for example, Libya and Jordan to the European Union.
Okay. And I mean, even before we talk about other countries, what problems are remaining towards the LGBTQ community inside the U.S.?
Good question. So here in Pennsylvania, for example, we do not have a non-discrimination law that protects people based on sexual orientation or gender identity. And that is something that our neighboring states already have. New York and New Jersey, for example, already have laws in place that protect people in public accommodations, in government settings, in schools, in any form of business, really, that assures that they're not going to be treated with bigotry or any sort of discrimination based on their sexual orientation or gender identity. The other problems we have here in Pennsylvania is a problem with conversion therapy. So conversion therapy is a technique that was developed many years ago in which it's believed that it's possible to change a person's sexual orientation or gender identity to heterosexual or cisgender, depending on what needs to be changed, and that they can do this through a number of tricks and techniques not the least of which is electroshock therapy, but more commonly through speech and ongoing dialogue, through the same kind of techniques that you would use to slow down or stop alcohol abuse or tobacco use.
Mm.
And none of these efforts have been proven to be successful. The American Psychological Association, the National Education Association, the American Psychiatric Association, and other professional organizations have all declared that conversion therapy is not only a hoax and fraudulent, but it is potentially damaging all the way to the point of causing suicidal ideations.
Yeah. Oh yeah. 100%. I mean, we came a long way since chemical therapy with Alan Turing, which was one of my hero. But I mean, yeah, still, it's kind of brainwashing someone into becoming something they're not. And how can we fight that, and how can we like prevent or stop these kinds of therapies, and what would be a better alternative?
So the best alternative is to do nothing, to not change a person's sexual orientation or gender identity, to encourage them that they are okay as is, they are enough, they are valid. When we attempt to invalidate a person's sexual orientation or gender identity, what we're saying is that we don't value them as an entire person. We don't value their authentic life. We're treating them as if they're second-class citizens based solely on matters that they cannot change, any more than we can change our skin or eye color.
For sure. I mean, I think, generally speaking, from childhood, like people that are part of, well, that are attracted to same sex, or have issues with, their identity. I think that they will kind of be bullied from childhood, just like, I was speaking with another gentleman from another foundation for epilepsy, for example. They're just different kids, and I still think that naturally, unless the kids have education, and I mean, things are getting better culturally with time, but these kids will still be bullied. So I think that giving people part of that community some support, because most of them get scarred from these childhood experiences, I think that would be certainly appreciated. Is there initiatives that provide, like free psychotherapy to people that are part of the LGBT community and that have been traumatized by some events that happened during their childhoods?
So there are a number of counselors across Pennsylvania. I can't speak for other states, but I do know here in Pennsylvania, we have one particular professor, Dr. William Kohler, from Edinburgh University of Pennsylvania, and he promotes a concept called treating the trauma patient. It's a trauma view of dealing with psychologically damaging impacts from bullying, from slander, from malicious comments made when a person is younger, and ongoing as the person ages. Beyond that, are there efforts? Well, I would say that all Pennsylvania schools are required under state law to have some form of anti-bullying program in place.
Mm.
Our organization has been challenging many of the districts across the Commonwealth because we found that their anti-bullying methods are either less than perfect, meaning they're simply not doing the trick, to just downright dangerous.
Okay.
And we're encouraging these districts to find different techniques to fulfill not only the state requirement, but to aid their students and protect them until they've graduated, and provide them the necessary skills so that they can fight back and take care of themselves, right? Because if we allow younger people to continue being victims, then what we're telling them is that the whole world's against them. And the reality is that as long as they're encouraged to stand up for themselves and speak out and seek help from organizations like ours and the Pennsylvania Youth Congress and and other organizations across the state, what we're telling them is that our message is you're okay, you're valid, and we're here to listen if you need us.
Bullying has always been a fascinating topic to me as a kid that have bullied, as a kid that have been bullied. Like I got the both ends of the candle, and um, it's just for me. I think it's just a natural phenomena, but I also think that there are limits. And kids don't necessarily have the education that, hey, if you bully this kid, let's say for even like 2 months straight, he might be traumatized for his whole life. So I'm curious to see like some of the precise solutions that we can have to fix bullying. Is it 100% educational? Is it trying to have the kids do, I don't know, a bit more sports, so they're not the last to be chosen? Because I mean, kids, how honest and natural they are, like they will instantly see if someone is bullshitting them, and how can we fix this bullying problem as a whole? Do you have like specific solutions?
When it comes to bullying, the very first solution I propose is to interact more with the parents,
Okay.
to have school districts interact with parents and explain to them, listen, your child's bullying most likely stems from the environment in which the bully is living. Now,
Okay.
there are times in which the bullies themselves are facing strange situations at home. For example, they might be in a position where maybe one of the parents is absent,
Mm.
and that child is growing up without a role model. And to be clear on this, girls can be just as vicious as boys can. This is
Oh
not
yeah,
a one
mentally
sex or one
specifically.
gender issue, right?
Mm.
So I would further say that after we've spoken with parents, the number one thing we need to do is to uh, continue with the anti-bullying programs, but provide additional supports outside of the school time.
Okay.
Whether these be online support groups such as ours, we have Pennsylvania Youth Support
Mm.
is one of our groups on our Facebook page. Or alternatively, they can go to other organizations like Pennsylvania Youth Congress, which puts on webinars, seminars, gatherings for kids from 13 all the way up to 24. And they had been doing this on an annual and semi-annual basis until COVID hit.
Mm.
And that took a lot of wind out of their sails. But now that the COVID restrictions are lifting, it looks like they're going to be jumping back into the game as well. Now, our organization tends to focus on the older generation, so anywhere from 24 all the way up to 99, 100 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And our focus is on getting adults to step in when they see bullying, when they hear it, whether that's in the school, in the
Mm.
classroom, or if it's at the playground or at the grocery store, wherever it is. We encourage adults to step in and say something, draw attention to it, call it out for exactly what it is.
Mm.
And if you feel like you're being hounded for being the one to call them out, just ask the person politely. So what you're saying to me is that the language and the tone and the way that your child is addressing this poor child here, the way you are addressing your child, is completely inappropriate. Why do you continue this behavior? Call them
Mm.
out on it, challenge them.
Mm. Yeah, for sure. And I'm addressing this because, as an adolescent, like sexuality was already like a problem in itself, right? Now imagine if I was the only one of my friends being gay, for example, that would have been extremely awkward for me. And yeah, definitely I would have need some therapy to kind of fix that today. I also think that the future of education, like if you're an oddball, right, like in many cases, which is okay for me. For example, Elon Musk was very much of an oddball. um, I think that the future of communities is uh, being able to connect with other oddballs, just that the sizes of tribes in a classroom, which is 30, you will probably be the only oddball, or I mean the only part of your little small community, whether you're like a gamer, or I don't know, whether you love to paint nails, for example. I don't know, but you can connect with these other tribe members out there in the metaverse, let's say in VR or in anything. And I think that this should actually fix the bullying problem in some shape or form, naturally speaking, in talking about in the future. I also think that normally sometimes heroes step up in case of bullying. For example, I was kind of raised in, a middle class, upper class neighborhood, and there wasn't much bullying here because our parents were, educated. I think that's, like you said, that's a part of the solution here. And I also think that sometimes heroes step up when they see bullying. They just say, hey, look, you can't do that. And that mostly comes, like you said, from education. To come back on the topic here, apart from, like turbulent childhood slash adolescent times, like what are other hardships that the LGBTQ community faces nowadays? Is it still a thing at work? Because to me, like, like nowadays, I have lots of respect for these people, and I actually think that they're of the highest performer in a company, like statistically speaking, and they're cool. Like it's just cool to me. Is it the same way, or is it like very different from the situation in my startup, for example?
So let me unpack some of that. The LGBTQ community in the United States, in general, they as we age tend to be a little more outspoken. Generally,
Okay.
we tend to we show up for pride events. We show up at off season, and by that I mean anything from September through May. We show up for things like drag queen bingo, or our local community centers, or we show up for other events that are being hosted within the community, and whether that's our neighborhood or our entire city or county, we're there, and we try to be there in a large enough grouping so that we stick together. We are part and parcel of one another.
Okay.
But at the same time, we don't ignore our friends who are not part of our community. We encourage people to be our allies. So for somebody who's cisgender, who's heterosexual, who's looking at this podcast, for example, saying, well, why do the LGBTQ community always stick together? The answer is we find support in larger numbers. And we have people who have gone through similar experiences, and they're able to explain to us what those experiences were and how they resolved them. Goodness knows I've been through a number of experiences of my own that were bullying in nature. I recall one time running from the school to the nearest street, ran across the street. The bus was just pulling up. I jumped on and I told the driver, go, go, go. He took off just as this bully that was chasing me slammed his fist right into the side of the bus, and the driver just kept going, and we were gone. This happened in 1986. Now, fast forward a total of 36 years, and here we are in 2022, and I would like to think that there aren't children running across streets to jump on city buses in order to escape bullies. I should certainly hope that no longer happens. My fear is that it does. And so that is why we have to remain far more vigilant now than we ever did in the 1980s.
It must be, can like the bully, I mean, like the first reflex I had here was like, can this bully get into legal trouble from like trying to intimidate or hurt someone like that?
They can. Sure, they can. However, that requires three things. It requires evidence. So local law enforcement officials would need some measure of evidence that a crime actually happened. Second, they need witnesses. They need somebody to explain exactly what happened. And third, they need a victim who's willing to speak up. A lot of victims are intimidated, not only by the bullies, but sometimes by their very own parents and their very own families from whom they'll be rejected if they speak about their own sexuality or gender identity. And so for those younger people, in fact, people of any age who are afraid of that, I would encourage them to be strong, to seek out the help of larger organizations and others within our community, and to draw from their support, learn as much as they possibly can, and then by all means gather the strength necessary to be able to approach, exactly as you said, from a legal point of view.
Yeah, because like if the bully is told that like he can get into legal trouble, he can get kicked out of school. I think that he will have another reason not to do that type of stuff. And like you said, I think it comes from the parent. We can only imagine the father, being this very macho man and saying, "Yeah, fuck gay people," and yeah, like show them you're the man, and stuff like that. And the little kid, their brain is so malleable that that's all they know and that's what they do at school. So I think it's fundamentally an educational problem. I'm curious nowadays. Um, do you still get like, say you're holding hands with a husband or something like that in the street? Will you still get like odd reactions from people in the street? And usually, who would those people be? Because I would guess that they would be older, have like kind of older mentalities, and not be that educated on the topic. Do you still get that?
Uh, it depends on the city you're in.
Okay.
Here in Pennsylvania, for example, if you do something like that, if you're holding your partner's hand in Philadelphia, there are parts of Philadelphia, such as the neighborhood, where that is far more common than it is for opposite sex couples to be holding hands, because it's a neighborhood. It's
Mhm.
heavily lived in by people of our community. Now, if you're in smaller, more rural cities such as Meadville or even Erie, Pennsylvania, you are likely going to be harassed or given stares,
Mm.
glares even. You're not likely going to hear much said. Now, having said all that, there have been some issues in places like Newcastle, Pennsylvania, and down in Pittsburgh, in Swissvale, in which
Mm.
just within the past year, uh, two different trans women of color were killed simply for being trans. Um, no other explanation from the police, no other explanation from family. And unfortunately, all too often, newspapers and other media tend to dead name the person who's been killed. Uh, and they do that, I think, either because they are not told otherwise, or the family distinctly and directly informs the media that the person's gender identity is actually the opposite of what the person was living while still alive.
Mm.
Uh, I would encourage people who are holding hands in or kissing or showing other forms of affection in public. I would encourage them to be familiar with their settings, know where they are,
Mm.
and understand that in certain places within PA, it's not a good idea, and in other places in Pennsylvania, no one cares.
Mm. For example, me, when I walk in public right now, I'm in Cancun, and my wife is from Oaxaca, and yeah, there's the LGBT community there is like is prominent, and we see lots of people holding hand, and even I to this day, when I see two people of the same sex holding hand, I kind of had this fascination, this secretion of serotonin in my brain. It's like, this is something special. I still have this reaction, and I would guess that some macho guys, specifically, if they get drunk, they will let their mouth go, and they probably will do even stupid thing. I'm pretty sure there's a correlation with that, because I mean, once you drink, your frontal lobe gets pretty cut out. So yeah, I think this is good advice right there. That yeah, like, and even like kissing in public, even I am not that comfortable kissing my wife in public. I think it draws attention, and I don't want to make others jealous or whatever. So kind of avoid that. So that's good advice. The podcast is already done. Like I would pretty much give you the stage here, David. And if you had something to say to, like someone that is young and part of the LGBT community, what would you tell them?
What I would assure younger folk in the LGBTQ community is that the expression "it does get better" is not some trite or conditional statement. It isn't. Life really does get better. I went from that 15, 16-year-old child getting chased across the street at school to now being in a position in my life where not only am I comfortable of being out when I'm in public, more to the point, I'm running a statewide organization that's drawn over 30,000 people into our support group on Facebook. And we're working in tandem with another organization called Powered by Rainbows. That's run by Matt Haslam Productions. And Matt has generated over 6 million views on YouTube. He's got nearly 100,000 subscribers, and his show has 5 seasons. By that, I mean 5 years worth of educational material to share, not only with the LGBTQ community, but with our allies and our friends. And more to the point, those shows have been shown, have been proven to have helped kids walk away from or step back from suicide. Wow. I know this past New Year's Eve, Matt told me personally that 12 people emailed or messaged him saying they deliberately stopped what they were doing, stopped attempting suicide because of his program.
Wow. That's so impactful.
There's a saying within the Talmud that says that he who saves one person saves the world. And while I'm not a particularly religious person, I have to say I like that. I do. I like and maybe I misquoted. But the point is, he helped 12. And there's no telling how many people our organization has helped. And so my message is simply this: step back from suicide, step back from these thoughts that are choking you, that are taking your life away, and come to people who are willing to give you advice, to help, and to make your life a little bit better.
It's so good. Yeah, saving one life, that life can save 100,000 later on. It's exponential. And yeah, if you have talent, and I mean, if you have a vision of something, you don't need others' opinion to push you back. You can go and build an entrepreneurial empire. You can do like goods, and yeah, that's a very good message. David, thank you so much. Where can people learn more about you and about your organization?
Well, they can go to Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter under PA Equality Pro, or they can go to our website, paequality.com. And from there, they can get to any one of our social media outlets.
All right. Thank you so much, man. Have a good day.
You're welcome. You too.